I'd like to welcome Jeff Browning to Emron's podcast. This is the first time Jeff is here. The story goes behind Jeff is he came to Alabama and broke a couple of records a few years ago, and recently I saw him at the Mountain High, and then we were drinking beer and discussing and. I was drinking beer. I'm not sure about you, but I requested him to come to Imran's podcast. Here we are. We're gonna make it a two series podcast out of this. First part was just I wanted you to kind of tell us who you are, and a lot of my audience probably doesn't know you, or if they know you, we'd love to hear. And second part, we'll talk about more trainings and so on. So, welcome to Imran's podcast, Jeff. Tell us about how did you end up at Blood Rock winning a couple of times here? Tell us about your running background, running stories.
Well, David reached out to me because after 2018, when I won Hard Rock, that's my introduction to Blood Rock. Was from David reaching out to me after Hard Rock, and Hard Rock got canceled in 2019 due to avalanche stuff, and he just reached out to anyone that had run that was in the Hard Rock on the entrance list and just said, hey, I will let you in my race if you come to Alabama. And I took him up on it. I might have been the only one that took him up on it, but I came back and ran the race in 2019. Like you said, set a course record, and then came back this year. We changed the course and I guess set a new course record. Definitely a harder course, more climbing and a lot slower. But my background, my name, like you said, Jeff Browning, and some might know me as Bronco Billy. I've been racing. This will be my 2022 is my 22nd season of racing ultras. I've lost count of how many ultras I've finished. I'm somewhere well over 150 ultras, 4,200s, I think 34 career wins now, 24 of those in 100 milers, which puts me second behind the infamous Carl Meltzer for 100-mile wins in the world. So I'm second in the world with 100-mile wins, and I am 50 years old. So I've been racing a long time, but I'm also a coach, ultra coach, and formerly a graphic designer.
So that's a great introduction, Jeff. Tell us about you said, how did you end up picking up ultra? Were you a runner growing up, or just picked up running, along the way? I'm a late bloomer. I started when I was 38, so just kind of bring that up. So
yeah, well, I grew up in Missouri, so in the 80s. So I played traditional sports in the U.S. So baseball, basketball, football, and track, and really concentrated on football and track. Ran the 800 was my main race in track and field in spring. And then in football was really the sport when I was a kid, and it was such a big thing in the 80s. And so I really concentrated on playing football and lifting weights and trying to be the best wide receiver and cornerback I could possibly be. Almost went to smaller college on a scholarship for football, but decided at the last minute not to pursue that, and went to a bigger university, and University of Missouri, where I found mountain biking in 1993. So I got into mountain biking in 93, in the early days of mountain biking, and really kind of cut my teeth in endurance sports in mountain biking. And it was more a hobby. I raced a little bit for fun, worked at a bike shop during my college years in the early 90s, and then moved to Colorado to follow chasing a graphic design career in the late 90s, 97 through 99, and moved to the Front Range of Denver, mountain biked and climbed, got into climbing there too, and backpacked, but mainly was a mountain biker and a climber, and really enjoyed being in the woods. And so I did dabble in running that whole time. I was probably 3-day-a-weeker, 30 to 40 minutes, jog with my dog type of thing to keep my dog from eating the cushions off the sofa or something. And then when my wife and I moved to Bend, Oregon in 2000, and my first friend in town, my good buddy Rod, who is a really good ultra runner in his own right, had just started dabbling in ultras. He'd run a few marathons and had just run a 50K trail race and was telling me about this thing called Western States 100. And that was my introduction to ultra running, was through him. And he kind of really got me turned on to ultra marathons. And we decided we wanted to run a 100-miler, and I'd never even run a half marathon or a marathon. So I'd run a few 5Ks and 10Ks, but I definitely in 2000 ran a half marathon and the Seattle Marathon in November of 2000, and then I ran my first trail race, 50K, in February of 2001, Hag Lake 50K in the coastal range of Oregon. It was a really muddy race, but I was hooked. First race, was hooked. Loved it. I liked how simple trail running was compared to mountain biking, because mountain biking, you have to worry about flat tires and broken chains and lubing everything and making sure gear's running right. And it sucks if you break down and can't fix on the fly. So I like the running aspect of how simple and pure trail running was. And once you're fit, you could kind of go the same amount of mileage as you could on a mountain bike. So, and you weren't limited to any trails. You go into wilderness areas, you could go to places that were restricted for biking. By the 2000s, we were definitely seeing some restriction on mountain bike trails you could go on. So it opened up, me to be able to kind of mesh this backpacking and climbing background and mountain biking background together. Ultra trail running was like kind of met all the needs of, flowing through the woods and climbing mountains and in a really fast, light manner. And I really liked that. I liked the training, and that's what really kind of attracted me to the sport, was the training. And then I, got kind of hooked and ran my first 50-miler as a qualifier for Western States in 2001, late in the summer, and got into the lottery in November of 2001 for the 2002 race and got in my first time, which is almost unheard of nowadays. But back then it was a 50-50 chance of getting in. There weren't that many people entering that race.
That's exactly.
There were only like 600 or 700 people entering Western States back in 2002. So it was really easy to get into. As I got in the first year, my friend Rod got in, another buddy Steve got in. So we all three ran the first 60K or 100K together, and then it was kind of every man for himself after that. They were having some GI stress and some, the typical ultra puke.
Typical 100-miler stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I started feeling better, and as the night came on, and ended up, running sub 24 hours at Western States my first time, and the rest, I just got hooked on the hundreds, and started doing 100 a year every year, and then started doing 2 a year, and then in 2014 I started doing 4 a year, and so the rest is kind of history.
Definitely sounds like you're hooked to the 100-miler, almost like when I started running a marathon. I used to do 1 or 2 a year and 3, and then became all 16 or 17 a year. It was like my schedule was booked, but not 100-miler, but most of them were a marathon. I was traveling from city to city, but it definitely sounds like lots of running 100-miler. So much question to ask for this part of our interview, so I have to be careful not to overdo it. Tell us about how late did you started in when you ran your first 100 or ultra? When you started ultra, how late in your life? In your 20s or 30s or?
I was 20. My first ultra, I was 28. And my first 100, I was 29, just shy of my 30th birthday.
30th.
No, wait. I would have been just shy of my 31st birthday. So I was 30 when I ran my first 100, and 28 when I ran my first, or maybe it was 20. Would that be 29? 2001? Yes, I would have been 28. I turned 29 in 2001. Or no, I turned 30 in 2001, so I would have been 29. Yes, it's been a while.
It's been a while, definitely.
Yeah, 29 years old is when I ran my first ultra and ran my first 100 when I was 30.
Definitely. One other thing, I just recently put out a podcast about fear, for people to fear, and one other thing I talked about is like just one of the things is just do head on, go head on. That's one of the things. So I think that's what you did. You didn't run. You say you didn't run a marathon or a half marathon. You went an ultra directly. So how was your experience coming from your background from a football player to trying to dabble in mountain biking, then running? How easy to transition? I think looked like you transitioned well. Tell us about. So some people like try to change sports. People like us. So tell us about that. Go ahead.
Well, I definitely struggled the first few seasons, the first 3 or 4 seasons, with like little weird injuries. I had a lot of muscle imbalances from the years of a lot of cycling. So I had some quad to hamstring muscle imbalances where my quads were weaker than my hamstrings, and that caused some like patella tendonitis and knee like runner's knee type symptoms, and some IT band issues because cyclists tend to have really, really tight hips, even tighter than runners. So I had some IT band issues and stuff like that. So I definitely was working through a lot of stuff, but I finally kind of got on top of it. I definitely was challenged. I was still on my bike. I probably was only running 4 days a week, and then on my bike a couple of days a week, all through that first 3 or 4 seasons, until about 2000 in the winter off season of 03-04 and 04-05. I befriended a strength training coach in Bend, Oregon, and he really got me training strength in the winter months. For about 4 months of the winter, I worked out twice a week, full body, heavy weights. I actually put on some weight during that time because I put on quite a bit of muscle, but it helped me get over those muscle imbalances. He helped me kind of diagnose and figure out what was going on with the knee tracking and all that. And so I really kind of honed in and fixed those muscle imbalances and hip issues with strength training. And I'd done a lot of strength training, but it was more like muscle head strength training, like bodybuilder type strength training in high school and college for football, and then for just lifting weights in college, kind of carrying over that mentality from football. Just wanted to be kind of a muscle head. And but I ended up, really getting back into strength training pretty hard from like 04-05 on. From that point forward, I really kind of embraced the strength training factor. I was inconsistent sometimes during the middle of the summer season, but once I turned 40, I really got consistent with strength training. And so that really turned things around with the injuries.
Definitely. One of the things they say in ultra running is 40 plus is your prime years. So you peak in those years. Sounds like that's where most of your running probably peaked there too. But tell us about your training we talked about, and I'd like to put more in next part when we discuss a little bit more. And when you run, like when you have to train for, for earlier years, we're talking about still, let's just focus on that, to build up to wherever you end up now. How did you build up those training cycles and for you? So going forward, we'll discuss a little bit later on in the interview. But I just wanted you want to see some of the first time runners, some first time 100 miler. They're thinking like, I want to dive into 100 miler. How did you train yourself to be and to be to get ready for your 100 mile first. I think Western State your first one, correct? So
Yeah, I just, I did a ton. I mean, inadvertently kind of did the right thing, luckily, because I'd come to it more socially and from an adventure standpoint than I did from a competitive standpoint, which was probably the best thing I could have done, because the first 2 or 3 seasons, I was just running easy conversational pace, just building a big aerobic base. And I already had an aerobic base from cycling, but it allowed me to like just consistently train. No, I didn't train high miles, probably my sweet spot back then was probably 30 to 50 miles a week with 2 days a week of cycling. And so I was only running 4 days a week during those first probably 4 seasons. Not until about 5 seasons in did I start to kind of run more 5 to 6 days a week. And for a lot of years, I ran 5 days a week and 1 day of cycling and 1 rest day. So I just kind of progressed slowly. Once the strength training stuff in 04, 05 kind of took over, I could handle a little more volume and running, and I kind of fixed those muscle imbalances. So I quit having so many setbacks where I'd be like train for 2 months and then I'd have to take 3 weeks off. And then I'd train for 3 months and then I'd have to take 6 weeks off, and be on my bike and cross train and do other things. So I really started getting consistent from like 05 on. Like 2005 season on, I was very kind of plugged away at volume about 5 or 6 days a week. Some weeks were 5 days, some weeks were 6. One of those days was a bike day sometimes, and I was really quick to back off if I felt like I was fighting something, like, oh, my knee's a little sore. I would get on my bike for 3 or 4 days and like stretch and roll and do things, and then and get a massage, and then it would be okay. I go test it, it'd be okay, and then I'd be back to running. So I quit having so many setbacks starting in those years until about 09, and I had a bad case of plantar fasciitis, where it really I was half a season off because of it. I learned a lot about foot health and foot care during that window of time, and I raced mountain bikes during that time off because I needed something to focus on. I'm definitely type A personality and I need to do something. So
definitely.
Yeah. So those early days, that it was lower volume. I didn't do a lot of speed work until probably 05, 06. So I was probably 4 or 5 seasons into racing before I really 05 is when I really started racing and started trying to be competitive. And the end of 04, really started to kind of start thinking about intelligent training, meaning not just running all my runs at the same, or, conversational pace, but starting to think about once a week doing something harder, that kind of stuff. And really got into it in 07, really started doing speed work, kind of actively doing speed work, strategically, in periodization phases.
Definitely. One of the thing I was thinking about for this part of the interview, I was thinking, now you are a grandmaster runner. That's that's where we are. Our age.
Yep.
I'm also 50 plus. Our age, we have to think about our body and endurance wise that we want to see how far we want to take. Tell us about the difference now you have. I mean, I saw you running pretty hard still, so that hasn't probably changed. The competitiveness hasn't changed, but your body will tell you to slow it down. Have you slowed down?
No, okay. I'm not slowing down. I'm not going to yet.
Yeah.
I really had kind of a I don't know, you could call it a renaissance in 2000, end of 2015, beginning of 2016. I did kind of a major dietary shift, and that really helped with recovery and body weight and all those things that you fight when you're in your mid 40s. Of not being able to get down the race weight like you used to, and not recovering quite like you used to. So I did kind of a big shift to optimize fat metabolism, or OFM, which is basically using a ketogenic diet initially to get fat adapted. So going really low carb, and then bringing back strategic carbohydrates around effort and volume later, like after the reset. And then from there, it's just a lifestyle change. So the lifestyle change for me is kind of pretty much avoid grains and sugar in my everyday diet 90% of the time, and still use simple carbs on race day and long runs, but and then use fruit and starches like potatoes around my training and around bigger training blocks and long run days. And so the carbs are a little higher on those days strategically, but say on a rest day, my carbs might be really low, like 50 to 60 grams a day, like once a week. So, and then I'll use ketogenic diet strategically here and there, like go to the holidays, eat too much, gain 3 pounds. I do a 7 to 10 day reset of ketogenic and then go back to strategic carbohydrate use, or what we call the OFM protocol. And that's just using strategic carbs around your workouts. So that way you top off glycogen as soon as you're done with your workout. So you eat some extra fruit or potatoes or something like that after the workout. So you top off glycogen, muscle and bone glycogen, get you ready for the next workout. It's easy to maintain body weight, especially for men. It really works. Now, my lady athletes, I train a little differently with diet. We do use a strategic dietary approach, but we use a little more carbs with ladies, but I've customized it a little more for the ladies and different for the guys. So guys could go a little more chronically low carb longer without messing with their hormones. But you can't go long-term keto. And I just want to put that disclaimer out there to anyone who's kind of playing around with it. Long-term keto is not great for an endurance runner. You think of it as a tool in your toolbox, something to use intermittently here and there, strategically, but not long-term. And so I like to always throw that disclaimer out because everyone likes to say, "Oh, are you a keto athlete?" And I hate that word. No, I'm not a keto athlete, but I do use the ketogenic diet. So
definitely looks like a sifting diet kind of helped you along the way. I don't know how my mic is sounding. Let me hold on. So Jeff, so that's a great to kind of segue from here. Before I finish this part of the interview, I just wanted you to mention about your ultra runner, sponsor athlete. I think that's what the shoes, and tell us about some of those upcoming shoes. I just recently got a Lone Peak, and then Lone Peak 6. I haven't worn it. I just opened the box, and you mentioned a couple of shoes that are coming out. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think the Temp 4 is coming out. I've been running. My favorite shoe for trail running is Temp 3. That's what I raced Blood Rock in, and that shoe is getting a full redesign of the Temp 4, and it's supposed to be out, I believe, March. So pretty soon. It's a good redesign. I think those who are geeky on ultra shoes and liked the Temp 1.5, a lot of the people that liked the 1.5 didn't like the 2 and the 3, so because it was a way different shoe. You know, the cut of it, the fit of it was way different. It fit a lot differently, a narrower foot and a lower volume foot. I think this will be a happy medium between the two, this new redesign. So it's a solid shoe. It's got some interesting water drain system built into the midsole, which I think will be a good feature for wet races or creek crossings. Also, the other really good shoe that's coming out, I believe in June. Right now, it's slated for June. Is the new Outroad, which is a road to trail hybrid shoe. I'd almost consider it more of a trail shoe, but it runs like a road shoe, so it's a very good transition on hard pack road sections, dirt roads, gravel roads. Stuff where a lot of times trail shoes don't shine on that kind of surface. They tend to feel sometimes a little clunky on, if you got a 4 or 5 mile section of road in an ultra where you come off the trail and you're in a pretty hardcore trail shoe, it sometimes feels like you're running in bare feet. It's just not that cushiony, and It feels a little clunky sometimes, and this shoe does not. It's very, very nice on roads, but it also is a great trail shoe. I ran in a prototype this year, or 2021, at Hard Rock. I ran in a prototype of it, so it handled Hard Rock fine. So if it can handle Hard Rock's course, I think it can handle about any course. It's got a micro lugged outsole. It's a more minimal upper. It's got good cushion. It's about the same ballpark stack height as the Temp. So it doesn't have a rock plate, but it's lighter than the Temp. So it'll be kind of a light, in my opinion, it's kind of a light, fast trail shoe that performs on the road as well. So if you're ever, as a training shoe, it's a great shoe for like, oh, I've got to run, 3 or 4 miles of pavement before I hit trail. And then I got to like hit a, section through a neighborhood, and then, pick up another section of trail, for urban trail type stuff. It'd be an amazing shoe. But it's also a great shoe for like technical stuff too, because it has a micro lugged outsole that is going to have, I believe Mega Grip, or not Mega Grip. I think it's going to have Max Track rubber. So it'll be pretty sticky rubber. So it'll hold to the trail too, even in wet conditions. So that's probably the shoe I'm most excited about.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to try some of those. Before we close this part of the interview, I just want you to give a words of advice to the runners out there who are thinking about dabbling into running ultra distance, 100-mile, or give a words of advice before I close, and we'll start the second part in soon.
My words of advice is you don't have to do mega mileage to get ready, but do volume, what I call volume blocks of training. So look at some specific weekends, 3, 5, 7 weeks out from that race, where you can do a 2 to 3 day block of volume, and think of it as progressive volume. So say like a 12, a 15, and a 20 miler in 3 days. So you're progressively, so the last day you're running a 20 miler with tired legs. So you're going to simulate fatigue, or kind of like cumulative fatigue on the legs. Also with nutrition, IV drip of calories. So simplify, don't overeat. Look at about 240 to 260 calories an hour as a ballpark. 600 to 800 milligrams of sodium per liter. Now your drink rate, look at that. Tinker with like your amounts. And your drink rate's going to vary depending on heat and sweat rate. So it's going to be somewhere in a half a liter to a liter an hour. So that gives you some ballparks to start with, to tinker with, because nutrition, it becomes a huge piece of 100 milers. The other thing I would say, a last little tip I would give to runners who are going to do 100, especially their first, good lights. I like a waist lamp and a headlamp, both. So you have something that's like right around your belt, where a belt buckle would be, and it's kind of following your hips. And then that's kind of lighting up the trail in front of you and casting shadows off the backside of obstacles, so it defines the obstacles. And then the headlamp or the one on your head is more for like scanning ahead and looking for flags and those kind of things. I think that's an important one. And also drip some caffeine through the night. Don't caffeinate the first day, and caffeinate into the night so you don't get too sleepy. Every 2 hours, 50 to 80 milligrams of caffeine every 2 hours tends to be a good ballpark starting range for most people. You figure about a milligram of caffeine per kilogram of body weight. So is a good ballpark. I'm about 63 kilograms, so somewhere in that 60 milligram range is a pretty good sweet spot for me. Those are my tips.
Great. Great. That's a great advice. Thanks for all the advice. And I need some of those advice. And there's a lot of math. I need to figure that out, but definitely I'm always suffering, even though I have done like 800 miler, but I'm always still suffering. I'm trying to train for Lake Morton at this time. But thanks for this part of the interview. Let me just stop this one at this moment. Okay. Let me just, because hold on. Reset, stop.